Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Phillips with Common Cause North Carolina, and thank you so much. Maybe you're taking a break from the impeachment hearings, but I appreciate you certainly joining us for what is a legislative preview briefing that we have been wanting to do for a while. And again, very good for you to be with us. Just a few things. We are going to do this in 1 hour, and there is a Q&A box that you can answer, or I should say that you can put a question in at any time, and we'll try to answer some of those in real time. You also have a chat box there that tell us who you are, tell us where you're from, tell us if you've gotten the vaccine yet, whatever you want to say, that's good as well. So we usually give folks a couple of minutes to join us. It's 5:01 now. And we'll start at 5:03. But while we're waiting, I'm going to bring in one of my colleagues that I have the pleasure of working with, and that's Michael Spencer. And Michael, it looks like you're there. I hope people can see you on the screen. Thanks for joining us, Michael. Michael, you work with the HBCU schools. We have a program, and you're trying to engage students. I'm not going to try to ask you to explain exactly what you do, but tell me why you are doing this kind of work, helping students particularly participate in democracy. Why is it you do that?
So hi everyone, Michael Spencer, Common Cause. I do this work because, as deeply cliche as this is going to sound, young people really are the future. And it is unfortunate that so many of them, that turnout amongst younger people is not where we would like it to be. So part of my job is to make sure that young people get out to vote, that they participate in this democracy, and that their voices are heard about the policies that they care about that are going to impact them in the long run.
Well, very good. And you do a great job. And as folks are coming on the call again, welcome. We will be starting our program in 1 minute. I'm just talking to my colleague, Michael Spencer, who helps us do our civic engagement work on our HBCU campuses. Michael, we have about 10 of these campuses, I think, spread across the state. You are connecting with students all over. What do you enjoy about this work? Again, it's kind of like you do it, you told us why, but what is it you enjoy most about it?
It's really the young people. Yet again, as deeply as cliche as that sounds, they are such an inspirational and passionate group of people. Just the issues that they care about, the depth of issue that they have, the depth that they have with the issues. I am constantly amazed by the work that our fellows do. And for me, that's the best part, just getting to talk to them and learn from them, honestly, about what they see and how they think the world should work.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for all you do for Common Cause. I look at you as a young person. When you say the young people, I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're the young person, but I know you're working with kids. I call them kids, young people, even a bit younger than you. So thank you again for what you do. I guess, folks, we will now transition into our program. And again, this is a time to talk about what's going on at the North Carolina General Assembly. And certainly the two biggest issues we care about, voting rights, and I've even got a prop here. This is, of course, the what we believe in, that everybody has a vote and we need strong voting rights. And the other one, of course, is ending gerrymandering now, what's very important to us as well. So we know what we want. We want strong voting laws where everyone has a chance to cast a ballot. And we also want comprehensive redistricting reform to end gerrymandering now. So in the next hour, and I have a wager with my staff that I'll land the plane in an hour, we want to talk about what it's going to take to get there. What is it going to take for us to have the voting rights, the voting laws that we know we need in North Carolina, as well as having someday a chance to really do something to create fair maps. We'll talk about what's likely this year with the legislature and what we might have to do beyond. And to help me do that, I'll be calling up in just a few minutes Representative Robert Reeves, who is the leader of the House Democratic Caucus. After we talk with Representative Reeves, we'll take your questions and answers. And then we'll, as we know, as you know, what we do in the nonprofit world, we'll talk a little bit about what you can do to help us, particularly in this very crazy, challenging time that we're in, still basically trying to do everything we can to stay safe. And I certainly hope all of you and your families have been able to do that. So let's get started. I want to provide a little bit of context to our discussion. And we'll begin by just again, there is the North Carolina General Assembly, and they returned to Raleigh last month. This is what they call their long session. And really, the main thing they do is they figure out the state budget. And along the way, of course, they consider a host of other issues, democracy reform issues, the two we care about, and there are lots of other good democracy issues that may come up, but the ones we care about the most are voting rights and redistricting, as I mentioned earlier as we were getting into this. So let's start with voting. Last November was a record election year for North Carolina with a 75% turnout. And by and large, no major problems. Seems like we should all celebrate and look to make voting laws even better to promote participation. If we're going to do that, first we need to defend what we have, and we want to keep the laws on the books that made voting easier than ever regarding vote by mail. We had almost 1 million people cast their ballots by mail in November, but practically all those laws that made voting easier from home, such as requesting an absentee ballot online, needing just one signature, witness signature, not two, and giving counties 5 weeks before the election to count the ballots, all those laws unfortunately expire. And after the election, we want, and we will be asking them, this was House Bill 1169, you can see the title of the bill right there. We hope that lawmakers will consider making them permanent for all elections to come. The other thing we need to do is to make sure that those long-standing laws we have that have worked so well, such as early voting and same-day voter registration and casting the provisional ballot that actually counts, we want to make sure they're not tampered with. Proactively, we'll be pushing for some things like automatic voter registration. Why not let every 18-year-old citizen of North Carolina automatically be registered to vote? In fact, 20 states already do it, including our neighbors, Virginia and Georgia. Seems like a very good idea. Or how about making Election Day a holiday? No doubt the majority party, they may not really go for that, but it seems like it would be good to talk about it. This is something, again, making voting easier for everybody. The reality is we have, I think, some great voting laws in North Carolina. All of us have worked hard to make that happen. Sometimes we've had to go to court to defend them, but there's room for improvements. There's also concern that we will see some of these laws rolled back in the name of election security. And with my nonpartisan hat on, I'll say what you already know. And there's a familiar face, last U.S. Attorney General in the previous administration, saying what we all believe and what we know, really, that there was no large-scale voter fraud here or anywhere else. Defending voting rights is one of the priorities this legislative session. Now let's go to the other issue we all care about. That's redistricting. Every 10 years following the census, legislative and congressional districts are adjusted to account for the shifts in population. And you know, in North Carolina, we are a fast growing state. In fact, we're going to get a 14th congressional seat. And we know that the urban areas continue to grow very, very fast, and the rural areas are remaining stagnant or even losing people. There will be more legislative seats, in fact, that will have to be created from our cities and fewer in our rural areas. As you may remember, our lawsuit, Common Cause v. Lewis, did outlaw the use of partisan data in creating legislative districts. And of course, there are some of our friends helping us celebrate in front of the North Carolina General Assembly. That was a huge win. Despite our landmark victory in court, the one thing our case didn't address, though, is who draws the maps. And there you see in a legislative committee room, some lawmakers kind of on the left-hand corner of your screen doing just that. They were drawing the remedial maps. So we'll have to make sure that we prevent lawmakers from getting to draw their own districts. What we really want is comprehensive redistricting reform. And those fine folks that you're looking at, all smiling, they are part of what would be the California Citizens Commission. And that is sort of where we all want to get to. That is kind of how they've been doing it for the last 10 years. And again, this is where citizens get to draw the maps, not lawmakers. So we will be getting a model bill filed in this General Assembly session. Unfortunately, I do not think that the majority party, there are the two leaders, President Pro Tem Phil Berger and Speaker Tim Moore. I just don't think that either one of them have an appetite to really do anything on redistricting reform. I will note that pre-2010, both these gentlemen were actually in the legislature, and they both sponsored comprehensive redistricting reform, including a California-style bill in 2009. So they do know it's a good idea, but they have, unfortunately, like it often is the case, the majority party decides that this isn't really what they want to do. Again, when we will see kind of how this will work, and actually there's our guest on the right-hand corner, Representative Robert Reeves. This was when the maps were being drawn in an open committee room, and we do want to see more of that. It's not the best transparency, but it's better than what we've had, and we'll certainly be pushing for that. And we also want to see more public input on both the front end and the back end. Unfortunately, stopping lawmakers from using partisan data is very hard to do. And at a minimum, we need legislators to at least explain why they draw the lines where they draw them. That's actually 2 House districts in Mecklenburg County. That is a neighborhood. You can see the Catawba River there on the upper left-hand corner. And it cuts the neighborhood right in two. It was very interesting. We walked through that neighborhood, talked to folks living there. They had no idea that their neighborhood was cut in half, but that's what happens all around the state. And so what we will try to do and hopefully do this year is to at least, again, have more of an open, more transparent process, have more public input, and particularly where lawmakers are going to have to explain why do they put the lines bisecting neighborhoods and counties and cities. I hope that haven't made your head spin. I was told I needed to do a PowerPoint in 4 minutes. I might have exceeded that, but I know it's a lot of information. But to help bring a little more context to all this, I want to bring up one of our longtime friends to good government, pro-democracy, and also to Common Cause, and that's House District 54 Representative Robert Reeves, who is also the leader of the House Democratic Caucus. Representative Reeves, Leader Reeves, he represents all of Chatham County and several precincts in Durham County. And Representative Reeves, I guess on this call, I'm seeing your name. I don't know if you are on screen and you can see me. There you are. How are you, Representative Reeves, or Leader Reeves? I want to make sure I'm giving you the proper, and unmute your mic too, if you will. There you go. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing good. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing well. You know, again, I do so much appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know that the General Assembly actually convened January 27th, but you being now the House Democratic Caucus leader, that means you're probably going back and forth between your home in Chatham County and Raleigh quite a bit every day, I'm sure.
Every single day. Doesn't matter if we got something going on or not. So, yeah.
You can just kind of close your eyes and the car will find its way, perhaps, although I don't want you to do that, but I'm sure it's...
Well, it's funny, Bob. I can actually, I drive now, and if I've got to go anywhere besides the General Assembly, I always end up taking the General Assembly exit anyway and having to turn around because that's what I'm used to doing. So, yeah.
Your brain and your car are programmed to do that. Well, let me ask you this. And, you know, I think that you've been at the legislature a while, and I've seen how you have friendships that cross the aisle. And I know that you have respect, and you really hope that that's the way it is with everybody. But we know that we live in a world where there's this toxic partisan divide happening in Washington. Look at what's happening right now as we speak. With the impeachment proceedings. And then even in North Carolina, we have seen it certainly far more. It seems like each session, it seems to almost maybe get a little worse. Yet, is there, and do you see, maybe it's the COVID relief, are there certain things where maybe there might be some ways to work together? I'm just curious what you think about that as you go into this new session.
Well, Bob, I actually think that we started this year in a much better place than we did 2 years ago at the beginning of that biennium. There's no issue about that. I think there's been more effort to find common ground on issues, more effort to try to approach legislation in a way to see if we can find common ground. Now, of course, there are going to be times that we don't, but at the same time, we then try to make sure that the disagreements, at least so far at the state level, are civil disagreements. You know, it's not a situation where when, you know, Representative X doesn't agree with Representative Y, then Representative X is the worst human being that's ever lived because of a policy disagreement. So that's what we're really focused on. So in some senses, I think there are areas to work on. I got suspicion I know what the next question is going to be, and that area may not be the spot, but in a lot of areas, yes.
Well, one of the areas, and it's very relevant because of the election we just came through, where we really had to change the rules. I know last spring, you and other members you work with in your party and on the other side, they worked and they passed a bipartisan bill that helped make voting by mail, absentee voting, easier. A lot of good rules. We had almost 1 million people actually do it in the last election. What do you
Mhm.
think? Those rules are sunsetted, many of them, many of the changes in the law. That means they expire December 31st. Might there be some effort to make them permanent? Do you think the majority party might agree to do any of that?
Well, Bob, what I would look at is what the makeup of the caucus is right now compared to what it was in 2020 when we passed that. If you remember, the champions of those efforts in the majority party side were people like David Lewis, Chuck McGrady, and they're not in the General Assembly anymore. And of course, I'm just like you. I don't know if there's somebody who's going to pop up who wants to take that mantle, to take that role. That would be great. But the reality is, at this point, all I can tell you is that the people who helped us get that done before are not in that caucus right now.
So it's going to make it a lot harder. You're right. Everyone you named certainly are folks that we work with and were able to talk with. And them not being there, I'm sure makes that a tougher hill to climb. Then
Yeah.
that also kind of leads me into one of the big things we've had to worry about in North Carolina the last decade or so, and that's voter suppression. We saw it, unfortunately, in 2013. Litigation, of course, followed. But yet, and I know you know this, we're seeing across the country, I think I had seen a Brennan Center factoid that said more than 100 bills that essentially kind of fit into that category of rolling back and making voting harder have already been introduced in nearly 30 states. What do you think is going to happen here in North Carolina? Are we going to see law proposals rather that not what we want to see at all, that might even be not only not making things that made voting better for the COVID era, but maybe even attacking some of these things that we already have?
Well, what I would say in response to that, Bob, is I never presume to know motives or plans of anybody going forward. What I can do is look at the past. And, as most of us concentrate on all that we have seen over the last 4 years, to me, the week of January 6th was most significant. And it was less about what happened on January 6th and more about what led to January 6th. And so you saw a really strong push among certain elected officials to really discredit the election results. And that there was a constant discussion about what those election results meant and all that kind of thing. And I remind people as often as I can that, take for example the presidential election. The presidential election, popular vote wise, there was a 7 million vote gap. But in reality, the gap was really a 49,000 vote gap because based on the Electoral College, had 49,000 votes gone a different way, then we'd have a different result of president, whether that's good or bad. That is our reality. And so there are those who before January 6th seem to espouse the notion that we need to do things that would have brought us closer to the result of changing those 49,000 votes than it was, with people going the opposite way about how we approach voting in this country. And so what you tend to see happen in a couple of states tends to trickle down to North Carolina. And so my concern is that normally what has happened is that if other states that are similarly situated, North Carolina politically, begin introducing bills, then usually it starts coming down the pipe for North Carolina. And so to answer your question, I would say that I have concerns, definitely.
Well, indeed, and that's certainly something we have concerns about too, and not to get too much into inside baseball, but correct me if I'm wrong, the governor can veto election proposals or bills passed. Does your caucus and the Senate caucus, I know you can only speculate, do you all have the votes to sustain a veto if indeed that's what the governor has to do?
Well, obviously in the House, our odds went down. We lost seats in the House. We went from a 55-person minority to a 51-person minority. And anytime you reduce your numbers, then obviously your risk of being able to hold those vetoes goes away. If we lose 3 members on any vote, then we lose that ability to veto. At the same time, the Senate's ability to sustain a veto actually doubled. And I feel comfortable in my mind that no matter what happens in the House, that the Senate should be able to sustain a veto. But on this particular issue, I would be very surprised if we weren't in a position to sustain a veto in the House.
Well, we'll just have to kind of wait and see how it all plays out. We've talked
Yes.
about automatic voter registration. Governor McCrory's appointed State Board of Elections director actually supported it. I don't know whether there's any common ground if that might be something that could be proactive. There are other great things like popular vote for the presidential elections, ranked choice voting, top 4, top 5 in terms of where you run without party labels in a primary. A lot of these things we think are good. I doubt many of them, unfortunately, get any kind of a hearing. But I do wonder about something like automatic voter registration, if that might be looked at as something that, well, both sides could benefit. And I don't know whether you've had any conversations or what you might think of that.
Love the idea. Haven't heard any appetite across the aisle for it, but I think it's an outstanding idea. I can't see why we wouldn't want that to happen, because I agree with you that it benefits both sides. And if you look at North Carolina's electorate, I don't see how either side gets an advantage, but I do see how the whole state gets an advantage because you've got more people who are already engaged. And, you know, and at the same time as doing automatic voter registration, we've also got to consider methods to make sure that people know when the government's attempting to take them off the rolls and get some notification of that. So I think those are great ideas, but I just haven't seen the appetite for them.
I got about 9 minutes left. I want to transition into one of our favorite topics, of course, is redistricting. You know, this year it's going to be delayed because of the census data that we're waiting on. And I keep hearing it gets pushed back and pushed back. And you know, you're in for a long session. I think when you're going to be coming back for a special session in September. Let me just first, before we begin, get into that. Do you think that the municipal elections are probably going to be either postponed, delayed, or even canceled because we're not going to have the data in for those cities that have to redraw their lines? Or what are you hearing about that?
What seems to be, and there's no consistency to what anybody believes is going to happen. What seems to be a prevailing thought is that they may run under their old districts, and then once the districts are redrawn, have to run again in a special election, which has happened. We've got precedent for here in North Carolina.
Well, again, that's a question, and I keep asking other people, and you're right. There seems to be a lot of unknowns about that. It's just we haven't really even faced this before. Getting to actually redistricting itself, and you've been a champion of this. You have put your name on all the great redistricting bills, and we thank you for that. In fact, I remember sitting in a room with you, gosh, it seems like 10 years ago, but we were kind of hashing out with Representative McGrady, you know, some of the particulars about that bill. We're not going to get a bill heard, unfortunately. I know that. I'm not so naive to believe that the majority party will actually look at that. But what do you think we can do, and what should we do? Is there opportunity to get more transparency when you all are drawing the districts, if they have this in a committee room? Are there ways to maybe diminish or stop extreme gerrymandering? What are your thoughts about maybe things we can do, the reality, again, of the situation we're in?
Well, I think we're in an interesting time because if you ask me as a lawyer, and of course, this is way above my lawyer pay grade, I think our law is really up in flux. I think in an ideal world, the Supreme Court would have ruled on the partisan gerrymandering case, and we'd at least have some law to go from. But what I can tell you that is a positive note is I've heard publicly from President Pro Tem Berger himself a statement that he expects us to follow the same process that we followed 2 years ago with redistricting, which again, you know, though not a perfect process and not the process that we would seek, is a much better process than what we saw in 2011. So, you know, we'll keep our fingers crossed. What I would say that advocates and people who care about fair elections ought to do is participate. You know, don't take a meeting for granted. Don't take an issue for granted. Don't take a time for granted. If it were me, as soon as redistricting hits, all hands on deck, and making sure that, you know, we're demanding transparency, that we're demanding, you know, reasons why we're doing things, because it, you know, again, the law's in flux, and we've got a different state Supreme Court now, completely different state Supreme Court, you know, to be fair. We've got just a lot of different people in place than we had 2 years ago. And we've got different political motivations. I mean, you know, again, just as you were saying, you won't be naive and think that there's a bill that's going to pass. I'm not going to be naive and pretend that the looming 2020 election didn't influence a lot of people's positions on redistricting that is no longer a pressure now. You know, you got a chance to draw your own district. kind of takes away a lot of the pressure that anybody could apply to you, because you know what your district's going to look like while everybody else sitting and wonder. So, again, I think people are just going to have to be diligent. And I think one of the things we're going to continue to have to do is to explain to people why this matters. I think the unfortunate truth is, even in the 2020 election at a state level, a lot of people were voting for federal reasons, but a lot of people just didn't understand that every single thing that you care about in your life when it pertains to government is affected by redistricting. Every single issue. There's not one issue that the government is involved in that you care about that is not affected by redistricting. And if we could ever get that across to voters, I think we could start holding people accountable for their choices when it comes down to redistricting.
When you know how to do that, you let me know. I've been trying for 20 years. It is connecting the dots, just like you say. It connects to everything, and you're so correct in how you said that. But what you also said was, and I guess this really does matter, the public hearings, there will be a time where the public can weigh in on this, and what they say does matter. And groups like Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, Democracy North Carolina, we'll all be out there trying to help educate the citizenry to be ready to make comments. That does matter. That is important, I gather.
Yes. Yeah, no, it does, because what you've got to remember is everybody is going to have an advocate for a position. And the reason that's important is this: for every person who comes, for instance, from Common Cause and says, hey, this is a bad grouping, this is a bad district drawing, and these are reasons, there's going to be somebody walking into that room saying, I think it's the greatest district drawing you ever could have had. It gives us what we want, and et cetera, et cetera. And I heard some people advocate in that way during the last hearings, and it was interesting. And, of course, it may have been Freudian slips, but a lot of times they were advocating to keep particular legislators and not advocating for particular district drawings. And of course, the idea is to have particular district drawings because those districts are good for the people, not because the legislator is good. Because you may have the most wonderful legislator in the world, but if we've got to draw a dragon's body to get you into that legislative district, that's bad for the state. And I feel the same way about my district. I mean, the truth of the matter is that, you want to have districts that fit the region and that, allow, we like, well, I won't say things that we like because there's even, differences of opinion on that, but I don't mind saying that I think communities should be held whole, counties should be held whole as much as they can, and people ought to be together, have common interests. So we'll see what happens.
Very, very well stated again. I mean, I know you know this, and this is why we always come to you to help put your name on these bills. I'm only got 2 minutes, and I'm sorry I don't have a little more time for you, but tell me what else is important to you and to your caucus that's not what we've been talking about. Just some of the other big issues you really care about and you hope to move forward in this legislative session.
Well, especially with this pandemic, and the pandemic hasn't really changed what our focus is. The pandemic has exacerbated the problems that we already saw. We know healthcare is a huge issue. And, the bad word right now is Medicaid, but the truth of the matter is we got to figure out what to do about insuring people. We got to figure out what to do about getting other people's health insurance down, premiums down, especially now that a lot have been jobless or have had their hours cut. Businesses have lost revenue. Getting insurance premiums down is important. And ultimately saving these rural hospitals. We continue to walk a fine line thinking that we're going to continue to have these hospitals just stay, even though they're losing gobs of money, having to serve uninsured people, because it's just like with the jail situation. People seem to think that if you don't address it in way X, that suddenly the money goes away. You're going to pay for uninsured people. The question is how that gets paid and what cost it is to your community. So that's one. Getting kids back on track 21-22 school year is going to be so vitally important. We're arguing about some issues right now in the legislature that we could be more constructive in the way that we're approaching it, because I think everybody wants to get kids back in school, but we also got to balance the safety and balance how we decide what is safe and what isn't. But that's a huge issue with us because we just lost so much with kids. We've got kids in Chatham County, for instance, our D's and F's have gone up by 74% in the school year. And that's not even talking about the lower quality of learning for students who are making good grades, but not getting the learning experience that they had just 1 year ago. So education is a big deal. Saving our small businesses. All of you that are out there now and are participating in this call that live in smaller communities, And even in the larger communities, Raleigh and Durham suffered the same thing. You've lost staples in your community. Small businesses you thought would never go away, they're suddenly gone. It feels like 2008 again, but with a double tax. And so, we want to save those businesses that are still there, help prop up people that have lost their jobs, and also help prop up the employees that have hours cut or anything of that sort. So those are the things we're really concerned about right now, and ultimately coming out of this pandemic in better shape. And then the final tie that binds all of this is getting broadband to every household in this state. And broadband is no longer what it used to be. 10 years ago, when we passed a lot of our broadband legislation, there were people like me that just wanted better Netflix. You want to be able to see your movies without a dime. But now, you can't live in this society without broadband. Just can't do it. You can't work, you can't operate, you can't have economic development, you can't get telehealth, you can't have education without broadband. So that's a huge goal for everybody in our caucus, and I think both caucuses.
So many big issues, and again, in this particular time we're in, making it a little more complicated than normal. I know you all are meeting in Raleigh, and yet I hope everybody is wearing the masks and doing the things to keep themselves safe. Again, can't thank you enough for what you do for the state of North Carolina, your district, and also just being a good friend to Common Cause. Wish you and your family the best. I should have asked, I know you have school-age children. I hope they're doing well and you all are coping with that. I don't know how parents are doing it. Mine are grown and out of the house, but I feel for everybody, whatever challenges they have. But thank you. And of course, I would be remiss without saying too, I really do appreciate the shade of that blue of your tie. I like that.
It was a little easier to wear after Saturday night. Yes.
Indeed. Well, you take care. I know we'll be seeing each other sometime down the road, sooner rather than later. Thank you again so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. And it's good seeing everybody. And I'm assuming this is where I sign off. I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, sir. You can definitely sign off. We can.
Okay. All right. Well, take care. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And anytime you want me back, please let me know.
That's great. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Well, what a great conversation with, again, a great leader in North Carolina, somebody who does work across the aisles. And I've actually known Robert for many years, worked with his father back 20 years ago when I had a different job. So I've known the family for a long time. What I want to do now is really talk, before we get into questions and answers, talk about Common Cause North Carolina. There are 30,000 and growing numbers across North Carolina that help enable us to do what we do, supporting us in many ways. And one of the people that I want to kind of bring up right now is one of our longtime friends and supporters, John White, right here in Raleigh. John, I think I hear you there. I see you. How are you?
Here I am. Okay. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you. You and I have known each other for a while, and let me just ask you the question. Why do you invest some of your time and some of your resources to help us, Common Cause North Carolina, which we're so appreciative of you doing?
Well, that's the right word, invest. And so investment return is an important subject for everybody, regardless of how old you are, your income level, your background. And I'm no different. I like to brag on my good investments. And Common Cause North Carolina is a high return investment, particularly in our democracy. And so one of the significant threats to the country we've already talked about is gerrymandering, where we set boundaries for political advantage. And Common Cause has lobbied members of our General Assembly over some time to reduce gerrymandering, hopefully to get us to that independent commission. But thus far, neither political party has stepped up to do the job. Now, Common Cause North Carolina has gone to court multiple times to try to save our democracy. And today, our gerrymandering in this state is much less than it was, thanks to Common Cause. So yes, I will brag on my high return investment in Common Cause. Thanks to Bob Phillips and his team, we have a stronger democracy here in North Carolina. There's still plenty of gerrymandering left. And so I'm going to continue to support Common Cause. And I want to encourage everybody who's on this call to do the same. Again, thanks, Bob, to you and your team for what you do.
John, thank you so much. And I think we chatted earlier, you and your wife, you all have been vaccinated. Is that right? Or you have one round?
We've had both. We're good. We're at the 95% level at this point.
Well, congratulations.
That's the benefit of being an old person.
Congratulations on that. Thank you again for all your support. And again, I'm sure we'll be running into each other sometime soon.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Folks, I want to bring another one of my colleagues who helps us keep us growing and strong, and that is Zinnia Bynum. And Zinnia actually has a fancy title, Development Director Coordinator. And Zinnia, I'm trying to see if you are coming. I see your face. I see it looks like you're now getting yourself. There you are. Zinnia, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, we are going to get to questions and answers in just a second. But for folks that might be moved, and I know many of them on the call, help us out and just let folks know kind of how they can go about doing that.
So yeah, I have put a handy dandy link into the chat if you'd like to learn more about how to support our work. I really love Mr. White's term of investment, because I think that's a good way of thinking about how you are becoming a member of the Common Cause family by supporting our work. We've been doing this work for, tens of years, and Bob can tell you firsthand about how we have fought on both sides of the aisle, thoroughly, and held so many politicians accountable to make sure that in North Carolina, a democracy is free and fair for all. And so that is what gives us the ability to do events like these, to reach out to lawmakers and both to invite them to talk to you all, but also to talk to them about what they are doing to make, to improve democracy in North Carolina. And so all of this takes work and effort and time and energy. Less venues for events, but still a lot of time and work from our staff members. And if you'd like to help support our staff, our cause, and the work that we do in North Carolina, I'd love to invite you to come to our, go to the link in the chat, or just visit our website and click donate so you can help support our work in the future. And Bob, that is my big pitch. I will send it back over to you.
Had to unmute my mic, Zinnia. Great job. Thank you again for all you do for us. And I guess, folks, that would be kind of our the sponsor of our program here. We always have to kind of do that as a 501c3. Contributions can be tax deductible, but again, we thank you for your support. So it is 23 minutes until 6. I am determined to land the plane on time, but now we're going to take questions and answers. There is a Q&A chat. I do invite everybody to put questions in there, but I'm going to also call upon my other colleague, Jane Pinsky. Many of you all know whom she is, and she might be here to help us answer questions that you all may have with redistricting. And I'm also going to call upon my other colleague, Brent Lawrence, who is looking at questions and going to maybe help us, tell us what questions we need to ask. So Brent, I don't know if you have maybe one, and there's Jane. How are you, Jane?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for including me.
And Jane, you got a vaccine as well, didn't you?
Got one down and one to go.
That is not to say anything about you being, we're both seniors, of course, but one down and one to go, good for you, happy. There's Brent. Brent, tell us questions here that we need to tackle.
Yeah, I have some questions coming in. One of the first ones kind of builds off of the conversation around redistricting reform. And, somebody asked about the Virginia redistricting bill that passed, the amendment up there that passed, and as a model, or what kind of a model Common Cause might be looking to for reform of the process.
Well, Jane, if that doesn't stump the panel, I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, Jane, I promised myself I would try to be efficient, and I know you will be too. You will as well to get to as many questions. But what do you say about that? Do we like Virginia? Do we like what they're doing?
In the best of all possible worlds, we would have a model like that in California, where there are citizens who campaign, self-nominate to be on the commission and who have no contact with elected officials. The Virginia model is a mixed model. It includes a lot of electeds. And it's impossible if you're an elected official to take the partisan data you have in your head out of your head. If you look at a map, you know about what the breakdown is. In fact, any of us, if you look at the map and you look at Charlotte and Raleigh versus Macon County or Catawba County, you have a hunch how those counties are going to go in a partisan manner. So while Virginia is better than us, it's still not the gold standard and not where we want to be.
Yeah, I'll just say too, Jane, I mean, the one thing that bothered me a little bit about it is, and we love our neighbors to the north, except in basketball, but they got a little cold feet, you know, with the party, the Democratic Party up there that helped really get this thing passed, and they now have the majority. They control, I guess, the mansion and the legislature. It seemed like when it was time to really do it, they kind of had to be, you know, coerced and pushed and whatnot. And that is just the way, as we all know, it works. But Brent, how about the other questions that we can answer, try to tackle?
Another question here. Another question kind of on the timeline for redistricting. You mentioned that, you know, might be delayed, but what is that kind of looking like, and any deadlines that might be tied to that this year?
Jane, again, what do you know about this? What are we looking at in terms of the census data is late to come in? How is this going to affect the apportionment here in North Carolina?
Well, there are two steps to the process. And the first is what we call apportionment, which is when they take the 435 seats in the US House and divide them up among the 50 states. Now, as you said, Bob, we are likely to get a 14th seat. I will say the number of people who completed the census in North Carolina was not quite as large as many people had hoped. So that 14th seat is a little bit iffy, but those numbers will come through in late July. Normally those numbers would be done by the end of the year in which there is a census. So by December of last year, or at the worst, early January of this year. So the reapportionment can be done. In 2010, we began our redistricting in March because the numbers made it to the state February 15th. It looks like it will be closer to August 15th this year, which runs into municipal elections, particularly in Charlotte, which are quite early. And since people who are running for the legislature would, in theory, have to file in December of 2021 for the 2022 election, it's going to be a real scramble to get that done.
So Jane, again, cancel your Paris fall plans. You will be in Raleigh watching them draw the maps.
I'm afraid so. My husband's birthday may be at the General Assembly this October.
All right, we'll bring the cake and presents there. Brent, these are all great questions. What else?
Another question is, any thought about pushing for a ballot initiative process here in North Carolina?
Well, you know, and Jane, you and I can both weigh in because you lived in the Golden State where they have it. I think it's a double-edged sword. You know, I think that there is always times where we wished we had it, and it seems like a good idea until it's not. And so, Jane, you might want to talk about a little bit of the California experience ever so briefly, to where maybe it's not always a good thing.
I did live in California and left in the late 70s. One of the things that passed while I was there was Proposition 13, which capped property taxes and sent the state into a financial spiral that it is still recovering from. And it was put on the ballot by someone with an ideological axe to grind. So while there can be good proposals like the Citizens Redistricting Commission in California, there can be bad ones. And to change our constitution to do that, it has to go through the General Assembly. And I don't see them rushing to give up any power.
I agree with you. Good question. Brent, continue.
Another question, what will the new Chief Justice's role be in determining the outcome of any judicial map drawing that may result from further gerrymandering lawsuits?
Wow. Now that is another good question. And again, it gets to where I think I can answer. One of the things that we had in Common Cause v. Lewis, and Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, it's that Chief Justice that assigns the panel. It was a 3-judge panel, and they can even kind of decide when the clock starts. So what else about that question might we answer in terms of how that will work?
Well, they can take forever to appoint the panel. They have to hear the case, but they can, in many ways, help push the court to a decision they want. So it's going to be hard to tell how this new Chief Justice will affect things.
It is a 4-3. Again, you don't want to think of the High Court as being partisan, but 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans. But Paul Newby is the Chief Justice, and he does have that power. Again, great question. Brent, what do we got next?
Sticking with redistricting, is there a way that we can immediately catch legislators when they draw their opponents out of their districts?
Is there a way we can immediately catch? Is that what you said or asked?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, that's the question. I guess during the actual process or during the process of redistricting, how do you kind of police that process, if you will?
Well, Jane, in contrast, to what we had seen 10 years ago when the late Tom Hoffler had drawn the maps weeks, months beforehand, and then they trotted them out and they had a public hearing. Maybe the maps have already been drawn, but it does look like we'll see sort of this committee room kind of structure where lawmakers are hunched over terminals. You were there even more than I was. I was out of country for a bit of that. What do you think? Is that possible? Do you think there is a way to kind of hold them in check in real time?
I think that one of the things that is really going to matter this year is pushing for the rules for how they draw the maps. And one of those things would be that citizens could respond in real time. You could text the chair of the committee or email the chair of the committee and have it read in real time. It's going to be a hard fight to convince them to do that. If any of you watched the map drawing last time, it was almost impossible to figure out what was going on from home, and almost as difficult from the room. Even those of us who were in the room were held away from the actual work and couldn't hear most of the time what legislators were saying. We also want to push to have districts drawn one at a time. We don't need all 120 House districts drawn in 2 days. We're going to have more time and people should be able to know what's going on. The other thing, though, is you're all going to have to pick up your cell phone and constantly remind your legislators that it's your vote. And as Justice Ginsburg said, you're there because of the people.
Hopefully we will get a little more context. It was confusing, I think, even sometimes for those of us who sort of know what's going on to even follow it. But again, I'm encouraged that President Pro Tem, and I guess Speaker Moore too, seem to be on board with at least having that open, more open kind of room that the court sort of ordered them to do in 2019. Brent, I think we got a little bit more time. We're running close, but what else do we have?
One other question on the redistricting front, and Jane, you mentioned rules. This might be a shorter answer, is how do we address the incumbency problem when it comes to redistricting?
The rules need to say that incumbency can't be a factor in drawing the districts. The rules need to be compact, contiguous, rules that follow state and federal law. Don't look at the residents of an incumbent. We need maps that are incumbent blind. Hard to do.
I tell you what, we may try to do one more question. We're 12 minutes to the hour. Brent, what's another one?
I'm going to group a few in here then that are sort of in the same ballpark. HR1, we have a question in federal level. Question here, are you hearing anything about an update to the Voting Rights Act at the federal level? And then also another question about the For the People Act that would kind of lump a lot of these democracy reforms together. And what's the prospects for those sorts of things moving forward?
Jane, you've done an outstanding job answering all these questions. I actually talked with our good friends at National Common Cause earlier in the week, and I think I actually know the answer to these questions. HR1, For the People Act, will be probably, our friends at the National Common Cause office think maybe in early March, the House may take it up and pass it. And then in late March, the Senate will take it up and not get it done because of this 60 vote rule that exists to move legislation that can't go into what they call reconciliation. And all this fits into, unfortunately, that category. There is kind of reinstituting the Voting Rights Act. That this has been put or separated, I should say, from For the People Act, I'm told, and it's called HR 4. I think it's the John Lewis. I'm now drawing a blank on it, actually the title of it, but the Voting Rights Act, I think, to that effect. And I'm told again the House will pass it. They might be able to get some votes in the Senate, but I don't think again it will reach that 60 vote threshold to move. But like Jane, you said, we need to exercise our First Amendment rights and urge our U.S. senators in North Carolina, Senator Burr and Senator Tillis, to support both of those things. I think the 60 vote rule is absurd. And I know that Common Cause also believes that we should do away with it. But Jane, I don't know, you have seen this, you lived in Washington too for a while. I don't know if this is going to be, it's not in the Constitution that we have it, but this probably isn't going to be going away overnight.
No, I think they may chip away at when it can be used, but it's not going to go away overnight. I would follow up on what Bob said, and I would suggest you make Senator Tillis and Senator Burr your pen pals and write them regularly. Find out when they're going to be speaking to your community, your Rotary, your church, and let them know how you feel. And along that lines, go to your state legislators and tell them you want them to hold a public hearing on redistricting. It doesn't have to depend on the whole legislature to do it.
That's so true. And Jane, as I am, you are a registered lobbyist. What does that mean? What do you do? Registered lobbyist sounds kind of fancy. It's not a bad thing either, but what do you do?
Well, it's slightly better than a used car salesman, I guess. But
Oh, no, don't say that. I mean, are we just slightly better than used car salesmen? And no offense to anyone who sells cars, but continue.
I do think that what we do is provide a voice for people who care about the issues that we do in the North Carolina General Assembly. I know that in other cases where I had a job, I lived in San Francisco, the legislature was in Sacramento. The odds on me getting time to go there were slim. I had to take a vacation day or a sick day. So my job in Raleigh is to represent the 30,000 members of Common Cause and the 10 to 12 million people in the state, whether they're Common Cause members or not, in making sure that the message that democracy matters and that they have to be held accountable comes across. And as I said earlier today, my new favorite slogan is "Only you can save democracy." So again, I challenge our listeners to do something.
Very good, Jane, as always. And maybe one day we'll be able to physically go into the building and feel comfortable about it. And as you always, I know, have an open door policy. Many people on this call may want to join you. I know they've come for Lobby Day, but I know you more than me are always welcoming folks to come join you and see you at work.
I would love to have people come join me, or I'd love to help people set up Zoom meetings with their legislators. They all know how to do it now.
Well, again, hopefully people will take us up on that offer. Thank you, Jane. Again, it's good to see you. And we'll be, I know, talking soon. But thank you for all you do for Common Cause and to help, again, promote the things that we care about in North Carolina. So it is 7 minutes until the hour, and I want to kind of close with a couple of things. As you're hearing, you're seeing many great people that I get to work with on staff. And then, of course, 30,000 and growing people in Common Cause, North Carolina. We've heard from one of the people who donates money, helps us out with that. But there's so many other ways people can help out. And one of the things is just being informed, following what we do. And there you see, we have a robust social media platform, the Facebook, the Twitter. I guess, what is that? The other thing, goodness, I'm drawing a blank. It's something I don't do. I guess
Instagram.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Jane. I was testing you, and you did give me the right answer. Boy, I seem old here. And then the other way to get engaged is the old traditional ways, writing a letter to the editor. I mean, people still do read newspapers. Certainly the lawmakers do. Contacting your lawmakers, like Jane mentioned, and I did too. And then there's a picture of us. Once upon a time, we used to have things like lobby days, and we would gather in front of the building, and that's what we were doing there. Those things really do matter. It's being active. Real quickly, I want to bring up somebody who does and helps us out a lot, Mark Granville. There he is. Mark, I know you have been to many things that we do, many events. I appreciate it so much. Tell me why you do this. You know, you've been very good to us. I know you're involved in your community, but why do you spend time answering our calls sometimes to come and join us in some of our events? Oh, Mark, unmute your mic, Mark.
I was ready to go. Got to get that thing unmuted. That's a Zoom rookie mistake that I should know better at this point.
No problem.
Let me just say, good to see you all. And for me, it's pretty clear why I want to be involved in Common Cause. It's really and I thought John, who spoke earlier, was very clear also. It's about strengthening democracy in a nonpartisan way for me. And that's worth spending both time and your money on for all of us and for those that come after us, particularly after coming through the last several years and this year of great stress for so many with the pandemic. So it's even more, it's always been important, and it's even more important now as we go on out. The second thing for me, Bob, and I'm really fired up now based on the gerrymandering conversations that we've had, gerrymandering is just flat wrong. It's not the way the world should work. And my profession is software. I encourage everyone who's on this call to Google map drawing software, and you'll find 2 or 3 different packages that you can do samples with on the internet for free. And you'll be blown away if you already don't realize how precise to a household almost maps can be drawn if they're used that way. So the crux of the issue there is the fairness of the rules and the process that makes it clear that you're able to see those. So for me, that's an animating topic. This will be a phrase you've heard before. Should go right there. Only you can save democracy is voters should be picking their politicians and not the reverse. So those are one very specific and one general and I applaud Common Cause and the efforts to make that better for all North Carolinians.
Thank you so much, Mark. Well stated. And again, it's great to see you. And I look forward to the day where we can kind of all not have to worry about it. And we'll be back together and doing lobby days and events down at the legislature. But again, thank you so much for your support of Common Cause North Carolina.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
All right. Folks, it is 3 minutes till the hour. We're going to close. I'm going to bring one of my final good guests here, someone who serves on the board of Common Cause North Carolina, Dennis Burns. Dennis, I don't know if I see you on the screen. I don't know if you're, yeah. Okay, Dennis, let's see your camera and unmute your mic. Dennis, again, we've known him many years. He helped us protect the vote, monitoring polls one year. And I think, Dennis, we invited you and said, hey, why don't you come to a board meeting? And you came. And then I think the next time I said, hey, why don't you join the board? So you've been our board chair for a while. We got about a minute or maybe less. If you can just say, why do you spend some of your valuable time working with Common Cause North Carolina, and particularly being on the board?
Well, it's a pleasure. And I think John and the others, John and Mark, have said it. Okay, democracy is critical. I mean, if January 6th doesn't prove it, I don't know what would. And the simple fact is we have had to fight both Democrats and Republicans because there's a nonpartisan effort that we have to put together. And our 12 board members around the state can't do it without your support, and can't do it, your staff can't do it without your support and without you being there with us. And I've done this because it's tough, but we have had some enormous successes. And I look at now it's almost 15 years, how we have improved voting so much. We made a difference in fighting gerrymandering, and that was us. It wouldn't have happened without the people on this call that you've met and all of you out there. So thank you very much, and keep up the good work, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thanks so much, Dennis. Again, great to see you, and thanks for all you do for Common Cause North Carolina. So folks, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to close with a quote from our founder, Common Cause 51 years ago, founded by John Gardner. And of the many things he said once, he said, all excellence involves discipline and tenacity of purpose. All excellence involves discipline and tenacity of purpose. We're in a tough time, but yet we're all in it together, as they say. And I can tell you, and you've heard from Jane and Zinnia, and you've seen, or I guess you've heard from Brent, Michael, I have a few other outstanding colleagues I get to work with as well, but we are all going to be tenacious and disciplined in our pursuit of that goal, excellence in democracy. Thank you so much for your support of Common Cause North Carolina. I know you all lead busy, challenging lives. We couldn't do the work without you. Our doors are always open. I look forward to hearing from you. Again, thank you for being on this call, and we hope that you stay safe, and we wish you the very best. Good evening, everybody.